Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are in the Oregon Climate Alliance virtual convening. This is the first convening that we have had. If you find yourself surprised to be here, you might be in the wrong place, but hopefully uh, you're joining us with intention and we can help provide some clarity for you all. My name is Hillary Blackstone. I'm one of the HEC staff that will be helping to facilitate this convening. And let's just real quick have the other HEC staff say their names so that anybody on the call that needs assistance knows who is an immediate person to contact and ask for help. Let's start with, I'll do roll call. Let's have Kelly say hello so people can see your face.
Hello, I'm Kelly.
Thank you. Madeline.
Hi, Madeline Seegers, Program Officer with Oregon Service Commission.
Thank you. Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Neese, Office of Workforce Investments.
Miranda.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Miranda Scheiding, and I am the current interim co-director of the Office of Workforce Investments.
Jeremy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jeremy Ahola. I'm with the Oregon Youth Works team. I'm a program analyst.
Wonderful. We've got some other HEC staff on here, and I'm not trying to ignore you, but I'm trying to let the other people of the room know that these are your key people to ask questions of. We will be helping to facilitate breakout groups later. So if you need anything from us during this event or have a technical problem, feel free to reach out. If you put something in the chat for the host, that's me, but I might have to assign someone else to help you out. So if you see Miranda pop up trying to help you, you know, she's legit. Let's go ahead and get going so that we can honor everybody's time. Miranda, I think this is you.
That's me. Hi. Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's really exciting to share this space with you today. We're happy to see so much enthusiasm about the work that we're all about to get into with these conversations today. The agenda, Hillary has it pulled up. We're going to do some introductions and understand where people are joining us from. We have Kif joining us, who can talk a little bit more about national climate initiatives. As far as the U.S. Climate Alliance goes and Governor's Office priorities, Brian Neese, who's on our team, will be sharing information about that. We'll also get into proposed Oregon Climate Alliance purpose and membership concepts, and that's going to be discussed a little bit more in breakout rooms. And then we'll report out to the whole group and talk about some next steps. This whole concept and idea was born out of some conversations that Madeline and I had encountered on the national level in the AmeriCorps, some of the events that we had gone to, and we have been learning a lot about what is happening in other states around convenings, around climate, green jobs, renewables, and things like that. And as we were learning more about what's happening in other states, we really wanted to think about and consider what that would look like in Oregon. And we think we're uniquely positioned in the Office of Workforce Investments to be able to convene folks together and talk about some more alignment around programs, some more elevation of best practices, and some more just collaborative conversations and thinking about where we can all go together collectively. So what we would love to do is to learn a little bit more about who is in this room with us. So if you could, in the chat, put your name and your pronouns, the organization that you are representing, where you're physically located right now, and then your primary interest in joining the session today. We want to make sure that we can be responsive to the needs of the folks who are interested in engaging this conversation. So having this little bit of information about you and who you are will help us guide us on our next steps.
I should have planned for some music or something.
I can hum. I can sing a little song.
Ooh, live entertainment.
That would be great. I have no instruments, like I can percussion on the desk or something like that. It's exciting to see the folks that are popping up in the chat. I'm seeing several of our grants and programs that work with our AmeriCorps team, folks that also work with our Oregon Youth Works portfolio. I'm seeing some other external partners that we've had conversations with.
Still got Kyle. Can't get rid of us.
We're just so charismatic, Hillary.
I missed you guys.
Good. We missed you too. Nice that you're joining us, Veronica. Good to see you. I have a bunch of friends that work with the Latino Network. We probably have some colleagues in common. If you're just joining us, please put your name and organization in the chat for us so that we know who you are, and let us know what you're interested in doing here in this space, what your goals are.
I'll provide that myself for organizations.
I love that verb, Jenny, ignite. Super cool. Just looking through some of the goals that folks have here that they put in the chat. Working on an RFP for workforce development. I see Elizabeth for climate solutions and natural and working lands. Our friend Kelly that works with us at this stage, she's excited to learn more, which I think we all are. I think that's what we're doing here. All right, Hillary, are we ready to move on to what is next? So what we'd like to share is we came up with this acronym, the ORCA acronym, so Oregon Climate Alliance. This is an alliance of folks that are all convening together to develop some common goals and to, as I said before, elevate best practices. So we just want to be really clear about the purpose of our conversation today, and I'm going to turn that over to Madeline, I believe.
Yes, that is me. Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize. I am battling a cold, so my voice sounds very hoarse, but I'm going to power through this presentation today. So we, again, wanted to outline what we believe the intention and design of this alliance is and what it is not. To give some further detail, we believe that ORCA is a collaborative effort between multiple entities. This can include state and local governments, higher education institutions, nonprofits, and community-based organizations. What is tying this all together is the focus that all these organizations have on paid climate, energy, green, jobs-related workforce training and service opportunities. The model that we're proposing consists of a community of practice and a resource hub that would be coordinated by the Office of Workforce Investments. It is not a grant opportunity. So at this time, there is no dedicated funding to the Alliance. This also has not been established through any state legislation. This, again, is just being really created independently by our staff here within the Office of Workforce Investments because we saw an opportunity and a need through our programs. It's also not specifically tied to AmeriCorps or any other community service program. We've intended to keep this open to a broad range of organizations, even outside of our current grantees that have a climate or green job or energy related focus, and then a tie to workforce development in those focus areas. So that is what I have. And then our next slide, Hillary, if you can advance it. To further frame the discussion today, we wanted to give some context on how our Oregon Climate Alliance fits within the broad scope of climate action work being done across the nation. To help provide this context on national climate initiatives is Kif Schuer. Kif has been working at the intersection of climate action and national service for over 15 years. He led the development and growth of 3 climate-focused AmeriCorps programs, while also working on a range of climate and energy programs. Kif joined Farallon Strategies in 2021 to leverage his unique experience connecting climate and service to build strategic resources and support stakeholder engagement in this field. Over the last 3 years, Kif has built a range of climate-focused national service solutions for a variety of clients. Notably, on behalf of America's Service Commission, he has been facilitating a national network of state commissions focused on developing climate core at a state level. The results of this and other work led to the creation of a climate core resource hub that's hosted by Farallon Strategies. The Oregon Serves Commission is a part of that national network that have been working closely with KIF to develop our state climate core model. So we're pleased to have him here to share with us today. And I'm going to now turn it over to KIF.
Thank you so much, Madeline. And I always feel weird about introductions and would have saved your throat on that one if I could have skipped it for you, but appreciate it. Hey, everybody. Really nice to be here. Excited that you guys are taking a plunge into this space. I'm gonna see if I can pull off the switching gears that I tried earlier because it's always tricky. Let's see. Oh, I know that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry, I practiced this earlier and now I'm failing at it. So excuse me a second while I get myself organized here. Let's see. All right. Does that look like a slide to you guys?
That's
Awesome.
perfect.
Did it. Hey, I was joking before we started that it's been 5 years of COVID and I still can't run a Zoom meeting for my life. Really glad to be here. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to dive in because I know our time is short and I'm going to go through some stuff and you guys will have it afterwards and there's going to be a recording. I probably have a little bit too much text, but it's good stuff to hold on to for the future. So I'm going to touch on some things lightly. What I'm really going to focus on is kind of the emergence and shape of a lot of these state climate core initiatives and some of what's come out of that. Because fundamentally, what I think you guys are building is equivalent to that. You might not call it a climate core, but it's grounded in the people power element of climate work and trying to bring that more closely to the state's climate efforts. So that's my vernacular for this. So first, I'll start up with some just kind of origin story and description and some value statements, and then give you some examples. I got to give credit to the Biden administration for really kickstarting this movement. When they announced the Civilian Climate Corps in 2021 now, it was a huge catalyst for state action. We didn't know what was going to happen, but the dangled $15 billion price tag was a game changer in the service world, and a whole bunch of states really started to pick up attention. It had a lot of political drive behind it, a lot of youth energy behind it. Ultimately, as we know, it did not pass. But in the meantime, a lot of states decided to plant a flag, assuming something was going to happen. And we saw this real groundswell of what we call state climate cores. These are climate programs with a core member element or a service program element, really moving up into an overall state role or perspective, generally being coordinated out of the State Service Commission, but not always, generally having an AmeriCorps angle, not always, but really kind of moving up from the single program level to a larger perspective. So we saw, California was kind of a first mover and an aggressive mover in this space, followed by Maine and Michigan and Colorado. What you'll see as I get into this is everybody's taken their own approach for it, and that's why this conversation today is so valuable. So we saw, I also think it's really important to note that this is not like something new. It's just a new vantage point for this kind of work. I always think it's really important to recognize the decades of experience going on in the environmental service world. Some of you are on the call today, and we wouldn't be doing this work if you didn't do your work for the decades before. And there's been some tension in the movement of this space as states have kind of claimed more muscle in the climate core, conservation core world, that there's a little pushing out. And actually, I think that's really not the way I want to see things happen, and not the way I think Oregon is currently approaching this, because we need everybody doing everything in the ways they do it best. But sometimes the ways that we do it best are by having an umbrella who can bring a bigger voice to that. And we certainly saw that with the American Climate Corps, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So recognizing that history, recognizing that momentum, but also that something different is going on with these state climate corps. So why are they different, and why are they important? So having worked in this space for a really long time, and having worked on programs that generally had a multi-pronged approach, meaning we weren't just an energy program, the programs I've run, we had people doing lots of different service activities. I think it's really important to know that there's no one climate corps. When the Biden administration announced, like, we're going to have a civilian climate corps, everybody was like, yes, awesome. And you kind of instinctually get what a climate corps is, but then everybody starts saying, and when they get down into it, what, where, how, who, and that gets super complicated. And that's actually okay, because I think climate change is happening everywhere to everyone in many different ways. So we need a Swiss Army knife. We don't need a scalpel. We don't need a uniform solution. States are particularly well positioned to be a framing entity and a bridge for that, because a state has the authority to act in many ways that individual programs may not. They have a closer tie to local environmental conditions. They may already be aggregating at scale climate responses for your state. And so that frame and position, I think, gives power to a state to be a major player in the climate core movement. The thing that's happened is, frankly, the cores in general have not been as tied to the larger state and national climate work as they could be at scale. And so these state climate cores are also creating a venue for that. A state entity also has some credibility from funding perspective, because they're sort of, they don't represent an individual voice. They can represent a movement or a field to peer other agencies or entities. So there's some real value there. We're seeing a real spectrum of approaches emerge in this field. I won't go into all of these, but these are different qualities of programming that could happen, from administration to activity, impacts, how equity is considered. And this is a very binary description that shows sort of a spectrum across what we've seen, which is, like, in California, they're really leading with a flagship program. They've put all of their ducks or eggs, or whatever metaphor you want, into one program within their overall portfolio. There are other climate-focused AmeriCorps programs in California, but really they've thrown everything at this one program. We call that a flagship approach. Most other states have taken a network approach. And so that affects the choices you make about design and implementation and resourcing. And that's something to unpack for a network like yours as you get into this work. One of the real values I see in this kind of approach is that it creates a bridge between programs and existing agencies, in particular within a state, who have climate responsibility. So the agencies have powers, authorities, resources that typically individual programs don't have access to unless they're really well connected, which some of you may be. But they have expertise. They're maybe they may tie what's going on to a broader state initiative. If you have a climate action plan, if you have individual energy programs coming out of your state government, these are things that those agencies have authorities over. There's opportunities to engage and identify funding. And you may have legislative champions who know and are connected to individual agency programs that aren't very much aware of the service world. And so there's a way to build champions there. On the flip side, core programs offer a lot to state agencies that they just don't have access to in the same way. There becomes a conduit. I've seen this over and over again. Most state agencies would love to know more about what's happening in the field to the communities they care about and the people they're serving, and they just don't have a ground game. core programs represent a ground game, and it's really powerful. There's new community engagement opportunities. I don't know a single person working in climate who wouldn't want to know better what the community thinks about their plans, policies, and programs, and they just don't have the time to get out there. Core programs are out there in the community and can provide that kind of community engagement arm that really helps bring everybody into the table. I think central to what you guys do at HEC, it elevates workforce and leadership development into the climate work in ways that typically have been a little technocratic and maybe infrastructural as opposed to people driven. And I think that has value. And then I think there's an equity angle that service programs and core programs bring into the climate work that has been less well developed at the agency level. So real value across the board. We're seeing a lot of, oh, why is my computer freezing? There we go. Some really innovative, responsive, and we hope durable solutions. This is a tiny snapshot of kind of what I think of as the structure and approach in a few of these states that are going on right now. A lot of what is being played with are resourcing, community building, and legislative levers, some more or less. California threw a lot of money at it. They didn't pass any legislation. Maine passed some legislation, but didn't put any money on the table. And so that just funded a staff person. Maryland kind of did both, and they're going kind of big with some really strong legislative and well-funded. Washington, just north of you guys, is another really great model. Put real money on the table and a structure before their commission. North Carolina is kind of pulling in some philanthropic money. Just a few examples of the kinds of things they do. And then they each are choosing different lanes reflective of their state priorities. So going a little further into a couple examples here, Michigan, really great state effort going on there. So what I'm leading with in these examples is most of these states have climate action plans. They have really complicated, well-developed, well-considered, socialized plans for tackling climate change in a comprehensive way. So in Michigan, the Healthy Climate Plan set a goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 while creating good jobs, building more prosperous, equitable, and sustainable Michigan. There's 7 objectives you can see in there that kind of all go together. And that provides a background and a foundation for their Climate Core network. So they currently have 5 programs going on in the state that have a climate environmental lens. They put out 3 planning grants, and they built a mission statement, if you will, for their network. And those icons and that language on the screen there reflect that. I'll say again, as I said it before, you don't need to take notes. Somebody's going to send you this, and you can look at it in more detail. But the back and forth here was really interesting because they did just what you did. They brought everybody together and they said, how can we create a frame and an umbrella and a holding space for this community of practice? They have ambition to be more than AmeriCorps programs. They have ambition to have multiple partners involved, but they had to start somewhere, and this reflects that. I will say they do have one program that is really at home within state government. It's the EAGLE, is the Office of Energy, Great Lakes and Environment in Michigan, and they're running their Healthy Climate Core. Small program, but it's like literally sitting in the climate office in Michigan. And that's really interesting space placement because then they're starting to think, well, how do we use this service arm more broadly and going beyond just their programs and trying to weave core programming into other state resources. And they've got a lot of IRA funding coming down they're thinking about. So that's a really neat model. Minnesota similarly has a climate action framework. I think it was passed in 2022, 2023, massive public input on this process. They have 6 pillars in that as well. And that has really helped them think about how do they invest in different environmentally focused AmeriCorps programs and service programs. They currently have 4 programs. One, the Minnesota Green Corps has been around a long time. The other 3, and the Conservation Corps of Minnesota, I think has been around a long time. Eco 3 and Climate Impact Corps, really new and reflective of this kind of growth. Are you coming on to tell me I'm running out of time, Hillary? No, okay. I just saw your camera come on. I was a little nervous. I'm trying to move quick. Then we got the Colorado Climate Corps, also came out in about 2022, very much in response to the governor's priorities for low energy transition and protecting Colorado for future generations, resilience efforts. They have invested and supported a kind of expansion or new programming in, I think, 6 different areas. I'm really excited about their farmer and training program. That's been really neat to think about for an agricultural state. I know Oregon has an agricultural route. Also, the Healthy Futures program has a feature there. The other thing, and I'm guessing Myronda and everybody who invited me here is familiar. They've really been leaning in on apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship, and they've been working on quality credentialing frameworks, and that's a cornerstone. They're trying to marry these two things together, not just for their climate core, but all their core programs. But it's neat to see how they're thinking creatively in that space. I will say this work gets a lot of attention. And so like, let's not be Pollyannish about we have to draw people to this work. And so getting governors and getting the president to invite a core member to a signing, that was a big deal. And so I think as we think about Oregon and what Orca, or if that name has to change, I saw the chat, wants to be and do, like, don't forget about the politics and the optics. Like, people power is great storytelling. I will say very candidly, climate core service programs are not the best dollar for dollar return on investment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or protect critical infrastructure. You can do better things. But to get people involved to build durable solutions that are owned locally and build momentum, I think it's a better return on investment than some of the things we spend in the climate space. So I don't want anybody to forget that. I, I had different slides prepared before November 5th for this section. But I will just mention the American Climate Corps. It is a thing that happened, and it is probably going to go away entirely. I don't want to get too far into the politics, and we might talk about it later today, the positioning relative to a new administration, but they did a lot of good work. They've fostered some interagency partnerships. They thought about creative ways to leverage core members and service programs as part of a climate solution. And I hope a couple of those things, the pathways for federal employment, the NAB2 trades futures, please, I hope they don't go away. I don't know. We'll see about that. I do think that we will see a shutting down of some of these particular initiatives, the EJ Climate Corps, Working Lands Climate Corps, but those program models are out there to be mined. So if there's models and approaches that fit your state, energy communities being an interesting one, you could look to bring that into Oregon, make that Oregon's own, using your own powers and resources. So that's all we'll say about the American Climate Corps. I also will mention, and it was touched on very briefly. Madeline said this before, I think, or Myrana said at the beginning, the network that we've been hosting for the last 3 years, State Climate Corps partnership that's hosted by America's Service Commissions with some support from the California Volunteers Fund, has really been working to build this community of practice, to try and set ideas and resources and to lift up opportunities, to give me some time and support to show up in venues like this and share these ideas. I think this peer-to-peer network is really critical because there's very few states like Maryland or California that have a lot of money to throw at this. So it's a scrappier effort. And we do that by leveraging talent from within, building something that gives as much as it asks for. And I think you guys are setting the right tone for that here, and would welcome, continuation in there. I know you guys are going to talk about some goals you have for this, what this network is. I'll share this language. This was the language that we agreed was the sort of state side of what was going to be a federal and state partnership, but is now just a state partnership, probably. That it kind of syncs up with some of the framing from the American Climate Corps. And I'll just walk through a couple of these pieces. We think it's important that state climate corps build on existing leadership and foster new partnerships. We don't want to see things coming out of a vacuum. We want them to reflect a comprehensive approach to climate change. Where plans exist, we want to see people leverage those plans. You in the service world and probably frankly in the workforce world don't have the time to think through the science of climate change in a granular way. You have people in the state who do that, and a plan should reflect that. It's not going to be perfect, but it's a really guiding document. We believe in paying people fairly for their service. We think it's really important. It's been an albatross around the service world's neck that has been an a barrier to equity, a barrier to diversity of participation. We want to change that. We think pathways to employment are a really important part of this. It's been also overlooked in the past. We want to see equitable, inclusive recruitment. We want to think about recruiting from and supporting communities of need. And we want to, serve all of America's communities. So that was a whirlwind outlook on some of the stuff that we've been working on, and I hope it was helpful to you and look forward to the discussion that we're going to have for the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Kif. We really appreciate you coming and sharing a little bit about the national perspective. And I think I failed to mention at the beginning that before we decided to convene these folks here today, one of the things that we did as a planning team was reached out to other states that were doing this work. We were really inspired by the work of Colorado. We met with Michigan. We last week, Madeline met with Washington, and it's just been really informative to see how people have aligned. And as Kif mentioned, one of our goals is to develop this community of practice so that we're sharing, we're collaborating, we're convening and bringing each other together around ideas and creating that community of practice. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And we are the Office of Workforce Investment. So what we're trying to do there is think about where these green energy, renewable climate concepts come into play with workforce development. How do they come into play with youth workforce development? So these are things that we're talking about internally, and we want to bring you all into these conversations and see where your perspectives are on this and what you're up to, so that we can elevate that too, and have these conversations. So it looks like we are moving on to talking a little bit about what's happening within the state. Again, thanks a lot, Kif, for sharing that information. I'm going to turn it over to my friend Brian Neese.
Thanks, Miranda. I'm going to put a link in the chat for everyone for the U.S. Climate Alliance and the initiative that I want to talk about today. In 2024, I had the opportunity to represent the state of Oregon within a climate jobs task force through the U.S. Climate Alliance, which is a bipartisan coalition of 24 governors that represent 60% of the U.S. economy and 55% of the population. In September of this year, the task force released an initiative with the goals to grow career pathways in climate and clean energy fields, to strengthen the workforce diversity, and the big goal was to jointly train 1 million new registered apprentices within climate jobs by 2035, and that's where that link goes to talk more about that. The members of the Alliance, the 24 states that are involved, are going to be launching some cohorts that are focused on sector-specific strategies, including clean energy, fuels and technologies, clean buildings and industry, and resilient communities and land. I'm hopeful that the Oregon Climate Alliance will provide a space for idea collaboration, awareness, resource sharing, and workforce training opportunities that will help Oregon be a proactive and effective member of this climate alliance and the goals that we are all trying to obtain. And along with that U.S. Climate Alliance initiative, Governor Kotek, as you may know, recently, I believe it's recent as today, it might have been yesterday, released her priorities for the next biennium. Another state of Oregon representative on that Climate Alliance task force was Karen Power, who is the governor's director of renewables. And to summarize those priorities that recently came out, Governor Kotek has prioritized an Oregon where healthcare is where you need it, where no one has to sleep outside, and where the promise of every child is realized. And those priorities are vital to the success of our communities, but also with an eye towards the future, climate-related programs will be an integral part of making these priorities a reality. The climate programs will create a trained climate workforce, will provide weatherization and other improvements to make clean energy obtainable, especially in rural communities, and will provide quality jobs within our changing environment. The opportunity to help support the governor's priorities isn't just a one-way street. These priorities the governor has laid out are also going to help create opportunities to forward these climate programs that are within this state already. They can help provide adequate housing, mental health services, demand for workers and jobs, engaging youth in education, and resources such as childcare to help Oregonians take advantage of these programs to further their careers and attain quality climate jobs. Currently in Oregon, one of the things that I found as being a part of this task force and also doing climate sector engagement is that in Oregon, there are many, many climate and energy work streams, analysis happening, and or grants going on. And I am hopeful and I believe that the Oregon Climate Alliance has the opportunity to bring together these groups who have these similar goals and priorities to help everybody move forward with what they want, with the priorities to help Oregonians take advantage of the opportunities and also to affect climate change within Oregon. Next slide, please. Oh.
That's what you were expecting, Brian?
It wasn't, but that's okay. We had a page that was going to outline what the priorities were more than just the statements that I meant. But home construction, weatherization, sustainable materials, and clean energy to power those homes and facilities is a big part of her priorities, as well as behavioral health that I mentioned before. There's a distinct need for enhanced behavioral health access for all areas, especially rural. And I think that goes hand in hand with providing the resource to individuals to be able to take advantage of programs to further their careers by making sure that they have a solid foundation to go forward with. And education, the other priority she has, yep, that's it. Last summer, I had the opportunity to visit the 9 local workforce areas and the grants and the participants that they serve, specifically youth. And education and early learning, I noticed at every single place we stopped, every local area, the youth programs had some focus on climate, on renewable energy. It's something that our youth, I believe, are very much engaged in. And I think by providing these opportunities through the Climate Alliance and Governor Kotek's priorities, I think we have a great opportunity to create some opportunities for the youth as well.
Next. If anybody has any questions about anything that has been shared from Miranda, Kif, or Brian, please be sure to utilize the chat. We are at the point of the conversation, though, where we wanted to give a little bit of detail about what we are proposing for the Oregon Climate Alliance. This is meant to be a conversation because we want to make sure that as this alliance is developed, that it's meeting the needs of the state. So what we do know already about what the purpose of the alliance is, to Kip's point earlier, is to coordinate efforts for project or partner identification, member recruitment, or other communications and engagement, build a community of practice of peer programs to identify best practices for climate services or service efforts in Oregon, and then align with neighboring state efforts for regional impact. So how is the work that we're doing in Oregon also relating to the work in states around us, and how does that benefit not only Oregon, but also Oregonians through their labor and interests as well. And then really what we will talk about more in our breakout groups is what are we missing from this purpose? That's partially why we asked you guys in the chat about why you're here today, what you're looking for. We want to know what you guys want and need out of an alliance like this. So what we are considering for alliance membership is really, it's more of a directory than a membership. It's free, so it's not going to be something that is paid. The Oregon Service Commission is able to host a website for us to share. Thank you for adding things to the chat, to share content, resources, job postings, those types of things. And then we're also interested in creating an actual platform to connect with one another. On that website, we can host a membership directory. So what that would include details about organizations who are in the climate sphere and the work that they're doing, so that it's easier for people to navigate as they enter the space. Who's in their backyard? Who's already doing this work? How can we amplify the work rather than recreate the wheel? We'd also like to include in this alliance quarterly convenings, with one of those being in person annually. So the idea is that we would hopefully meet in person at least once a year and host quarterly convenings where we can get everybody back to the table to keep talking about developments in your region, current trends and needs, that type of thing. And then all of this is really intended to encourage connection to each other and connection to resources. Again, it feels like we can often get trapped in silos where we're only operating, 5 feet in front of us, where if we open up those blinders, we might be able to work together better, or one of your partners could potentially qualify for a grant opportunity that comes up, and you could work with them to help them get that opportunity while working with them. So again, this is where we want to invite your guys' feedback. This is mainly what the breakout group discussions will focus on. What can we do? How can we create this alliance to meet your needs? And what are your needs? And then we wanted to include on the side here, as this is with a lens of workforce and people that are doing this work in climate-related sectors, that is lands and water, energy, urban areas and housing, community resilience, food systems, capacity building, research. There's a lot. There's a lot going on. It's a broad space. So how do we really support the workers that are getting into this work and help to accomplish it? So with that, here are your breakout room prompts. You will also have a facilitator in each of your breakout rooms. I'm sorry, I think I'm cutting over my boss, Miranda. Did you want to talk about the breakout rooms?
You can keep going, Hillary. Go for it.
I'll just keep going.
Both good readers, so I
Well, thank you. So in your breakout rooms, we are mainly asking questions around two things, which is related to your work and then related to developing this alliance. So with your work, what are the challenges that you face in advancing your work? And how are you currently addressing equity in recruitment or tackling environmental justice in the service activities within your work? And then in regards to the alliance development, what and where have you seen promising approaches to improving equity and environmental justice in Oregon? Have you seen this in specific programs modeled really well? And what did that look like? What would your goals for the Oregon Climate Alliance be? What supports are most needed, and how can this alliance help? How would you improve our proposed model, which is basically quarterly convenings in a hosted mutual space? And then number 4, what are the key kind of membership directory questions that you'd like to know to feel better connected to the climate network in Oregon? So that would be basically, as people fill out a directory form to say like, hey, I do climate work, I want people to know I exist and be able to discover us and our work here. Like, what are the questions that you're looking for? We can assume some, right? Like we want to know the organization name and where you operate, but we might also want to know, or you might also be curious to know what other partners are out there that are in the local government space versus the private business space. We want to know kind of the types of work that you're engaged in. Is it related to food, or is it related to energy, that type of stuff? So what are some other key questions that you could think that we should include in our form so that you feel informed as you are navigating and finding partners to connect with? And with that, we have I think we have about 20 minutes to spend in the breakout rooms. Thank you, Miranda, for putting those questions in the chat there. We have one of the HEC staff assigned to each of the breakout rooms. Yes, just verifying that that didn't change. So I will be pushing people to breakout rooms. If for whatever reason you don't get sent to a room, I will be in the main room and can help reconnect and readjust as needed. Okay. Let's assign away. Thank you guys. Doug, do you guys see something to have you join a room, or is it not allowing you to join? Oh, okay.
with our partners. Ah.
You're muted, Hillary.
Oh, I was muted? Of course. I said, thanks for joining us back. And I said, if you didn't already leave your room, those that are holding out will be pushed back here within a few seconds. Great. Wonderful. All right, folks, thanks for taking the time to really participate in those breakout groups. I know everybody loves being in a breakout group the week after Thanksgiving and eating too much pie and having all this stuff on your mind for the end of the year. It's it's big. So let's share out what we kind of learned together. Miranda's group was in room number 1. So is there someone from Miranda's group that would like to share? Or else it's her.
I think I can share to keep things efficient. I was taking some notes. We had we had 2 staff, so me and Aaliyah, and then we had 3 other folks. We had Brian from PGE, we had Katie from the Oregon Heritage folks, and we had Rosemary from PSU, Portland State. I'm from Pennsylvania, so we have a whole different PSU in Pennsylvania. So a few themes, a few roadblocks that came up were just cultural responsiveness for programs and program readiness, and thinking about what that looks like. Um, and and that seemed like a reoccurring theme, and how to integrate climate type work into what would be like traditional work, right? So as we're thinking about workforce development, thinking about Brian, you and I have had a lot of these conversations around like the traditional trades versus where we're going now. So uh, Katie shared a little bit about historic preservation. So we're talking about old buildings versus like updating and the new pieces to be climate resilient. And we've had some of those conversations around like in other states, a big priority for their climate work is weatherization, and that's folds right into that. I feel like I'm not focused in my response. One of the big goals, we didn't get to the second set of questions about like where we're trying to go, because we were talking a lot about where we're coming from and what we're doing and how it relates to this work. But really, folks want to try and understand the scope of what we're trying to do here. And I think Madeline will hear me when I say that like we need to hone in like what our direction is, and get some more information from everybody participating about where that's going. And then right at the end, before we had to run from our breakout rooms, one of the questions that came up was around tribal community engagement, which is something that was on my mind anyway. So I was glad to see that question elevated too. So what are we doing around some of the work that the tribes are already doing this in this space? I think that's it. If there's anything to add, Brian, Katie, Rosemary, Aaliyah, please hop on. That's it, Hillary.
Great, awesome. The next group was room 2 was Brian's group.
I can go ahead and kind of talk about the conversations we had. And before I do that, Hillary, you mentioned eating too much pie. I've never got to a point where I've eaten too much pie. There's always one more piece that I could probably go for. We did not get through a lot of the questions, but that's a good thing because we really had some great conversations about the questions that we did. It seemed that it was applicable to really everybody in the room, which was awesome. The first one about the challenges that we faced in advancing our work, it was pretty much, I think, unanimous that organizational capacity was a big big barrier to accomplishing what we set out to do. Lots of projects all over. As another barrier that came up, or a challenge, was engagement, and I think that was fairly universal as well. Getting the information to those who might want to take advantage, explaining what this work means. Miranda, as you mentioned, we've had talks about trades, and is it a climate type of apprenticeship, or is it just a traditional apprenticeship that's working in the climate field? There's so much going on and so much definition that has happened and needs to happen that it can be challenging. Another challenge that came up was workforce, especially in the rural areas. Having the local capacity to bring those that are skilled and trained in the work in. Is there housing available? Are they able to have the transportation and have the housing to even be able to work in some of these rural areas? Additionally, retaining that workforce in those rural areas, having the opportunities local so that individuals that are from that area or live there now are able to take advantage of it and enhance the environment within their local communities. Question number 2 talked about currently addressing equity in recruitment, and it sounds like the vast majority of the programs do have an underserved population criteria, or at least element involved, in order to help to engage and bring individuals into work that might not be traditional for them, or non-traditional jobs, and getting individuals into that. One really interesting idea that came up, I think it was Kira that said that they, within the construction sector, they have an incentive program for DEI hires within their building programs, which was really interesting to me. If anybody from our group wants to add, please feel free. That was as far as we got.
Particularly 7 seconds for a pause. Kelly, your group is next.
All right. So I was in a group with James, Laura, Chris, and Carrie. And some of the challenges that our group talked about was capacity building, funding, knowing who to reach within the communities for collaboration and partnership, having the folks present who are able to make those decisions to move work forward. And some of the things that our group discussed wanting to make sure to move forward with is having the consistent network, consistent engagement, not trying to create solutions in a silo, making sure that communities have a seat at the table, and that where the work is happening reflects the communities. And bringing people together builds resilience. It doesn't have to necessarily even be climate specific in order to make an impact. If any of my group wants to throw in anything additional.
Let's go over to Madeline's group. Madeline, how's your voice also? Don't let me push you too far.
It's weakening, but I think I can summarize in a minute or two what our group discussed. Thanks for checking in. So I was in a group with Ashley from the Heck KIF, who presented earlier, Jenny Harlan from the Suquamish tribe in Washington, Rose Highbear from Elderberry Wisdom Farm, and then Elliot Eastman from the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Our group talked about some challenges that have already been shared by the other groups, but just that capacity is an issue, funding limitations, or having limitations placed on the work that's being done because of grant parameters and having to meet some tight deadlines. And then specifically thinking about tribal communities, there can be some a lack of knowledge or respect from non-tribal entities that want to engage with the tribes around climate work. So just some of that cultural humility work to be done. And then with the second question, so an interesting that was brought up is the Department of Land Conservation and Development is currently scoring, or will be scoring, applications for their Community Green Infrastructure Grant. And so their scoring criteria really is centered around equity and environmental justice. So taking those things into account as they give out this first round of funds to programs. And then thinking about just the program design, we talked about like who gets access to what first, like how you prioritize need and who do you consider to be of highest need, and figure out how those resources are distributed. And then when we were thinking about, maybe I'll just jump down. Yeah, so thinking about the last questions about the alliance development and the support, our group talked about just being sure that we have a variety of outreach methods to make organizations aware of this alliance and get people interested in the work and in partnering, and just being clear what our purpose is and the value that we're adding by creating this alliance, clear about what people are getting out of it and what is being asked of them to participate. And I believe those, yeah, if anyone else has anything they would like to share from a group, please go ahead. But I believe that's the main points that were shared.
Jeremy, you're next.
Thanks. As most breakout groups go, we ran out of time, barely got through the first two questions, just started in on the what we can do next, how do we improve, and we got, as most of the programs had likely cut short. So unfortunately, we didn't get to the depth of the second half, but for the first half, we had a really unique perspective of voices from the legislative policy, from the state perspective. How do we align conversations? How do we identify conversations, the work, the efforts, the vastness of this climate work across the state? And then once we're there, how do we work in that space to figure out what the sector needs are, the pathways to get there? And then on the entry part of that conversation is the young folks who are in this work and wanting to learn about this work. How do we help those folks not only become aware, feel like they are connected, have culturally appropriate training that's relevant to their community or their lived experience, and then also what do we do to help connect them to the network of folks who are already embedded into this work and help create and bridge pathways. It was a really unique conversation of seeing it from the folks who are just starting out to the impact that could affect the structure all across the statewide system. Were the two main themes that came out of our group that I recognized, but that was from my perspective of hearing that. So I do open it up to anybody who is in breakout room with me to share any other takeaways that they had gained from that time.
Let's go to Jen Denny.
Yeah, so for the sake of time, I might just summarize the second half of the questions. So it sounded like our group, since this information was so new, they learned about it today, that they feel like they need some more time to think about it, on how to really answer those questions, to give it some more thought. We also talked about that there are other groups doing similar work, so to make sure we're in coordination with them. And then there was one piece about feeding into workforce training programs, making sure we get young people involved into the jobs associated with the Alliance.
Wonderful. Thank you. You all did a really great job. In my moments of popping around, I had heard a few things come up, and you all did a really great job sharing a broad variety of things without overlapping each other. So that was great job, team. Good job sharing out. I hope those conversations were helpful, even if they were limited in how much we could really drill into this. I think for those folks that didn't have enough time with the breakout rooms, hopefully that sparks the light of why this work is important and why coming together and having these conversations is important. We've got a lot to to digest as a group. But yeah, let's talk about what next steps are. We have got 5 minutes left of our meeting, so we want to be accountable to you guys and honor your time, but also let you know what we're hoping to be able to do after this meeting ends. I think, Jeremy, did we assign that to you?
I think you did. Hello, everyone. And for those of you who didn't catch my name earlier on, my name is Jeremy Ahla. I am with the youth workforce team at the Office of Workforce Investment and helping support some of this work in a program called the Oregon Youth Corps. I want to express my appreciation for everyone who did attend today and showing some commitment and opportunity to come together and just listen and learn in this space. As we open the door for conversations, the Oregon Climate Alliance that we anticipate being able to move forward with really is an organic effort that we are trying to start the conversation. And that conversation really can't begin without asking and inviting you to this conversation and seeing where this conversation can ultimately take us as a group. Really, what I think what we're looking at for next steps after today is coordinating the conversations that happen not only in the breakout room, in the chat, across the different things that we had heard from our speakers today. Launching that directory, getting that information updated and accurate so we can start the connection process. But what does that look like to bridge connections either through developing websites, creating and hosting a platform, convening the directory, or convening the quarterly meetings? Those are things that you can look at to this group to kind of help start, initiate, and express and extend that invitation for you to join that community as we move forward. One of the things that we will look at is we do have a legislative session coming up and a change of leadership at the presidential level across the United States. So you can look for this team to also start looking at the various different initiatives that may come out of the state or the national level, and what those impacts or policies might have at the local level. So that's something that we'll try to keep on top of and monitor as well. And then with the creating of the alliance, how do we coordinate the efforts? How do we build community? And then how do we align the state efforts to make sure that we're in alignment with our neighbors that surround us to the north and to the south? And then what are we doing to extend the opportunities to invite either elected state officials or agency partners into these conversations that are subject matter experts that can help really steer the conversation at more of a technical level that some of you might need. So these are some of the things that we're hearing, observing, and taking away from some of just the initial breakout conversations as well. But the themes that I heard today, pathways, awareness, environmental equity, uniting conversations, identifying the vastness of this work, mapping it out. Those are things that we can look towards to the future and start building together. And I recognize we have 2 minutes left, so I don't want to hold us up, but I want to say thank you for your time and efforts today. And if anyone else from the team has any last parting words, I'll pass that over to them. But thank you for your time and efforts today.
I came off mute to silent clap. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for summarizing that. Thank you, Kif, for joining us and helping to lend your voice and insight from that national perspective and from what other states are doing around this work. Thank you all for being here. Let's keep these conversations going, and you'll be hearing from us shortly about our directory and hopefully convening another session to bring folks together around the table. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.